I was very fortunate to have great teachers, people I could learn from, whether that were friends in my year, friends above me, below me, had a good family to support me. And I think that that was all good. But in terms of the actual learning capabilities of myself, I definitely think I had my ups and downs. Welcome back to Mindful Morsels, where through tools like Notion, a productivity software, I help you do more with less. My name is Sam Lee. I'm a current 22-year-old living in Washington, D.C. And today I want to talk about why I don't feel like I was the best student in the traditional sense. I, like most people, was in some form of school starting from age 3 to age 22. That's through preschool, elementary, middle school, high school, and college. And that's the majority of my life so far. That is at least 85% of my life where I am either in school or thinking about what school will be like once summer is over or the break is over. And I think that's a very specific mentality to have that I am just now only a few months out of, really. And I think for the most part, I had a great time in school. I was very fortunate to have great teachers, people I could learn from, whether that were friends in my year, friends above me, below me, had a good family to support me. And I think that that was all good. But in terms of the actual learning capabilities of myself, I definitely think I had my ups and downs. I could start from the very beginning, like in preschool, even though I don't remember much. But I think the more significant and pivotal times are when somebody goes through like high school and college. And in high school, I noticed that I wasn't very good in certain classes. Yes, they tended to lean in the traditional like STEM classes, especially honors chemistry. My sophomore year, I was not doing well in that class, and it wasn't for lack of trying. And I think that's going to be a key theme of this podcast episode of understanding why I didn't feel like I was always the best traditional student, but still was figuring out ways to learn and get the most out of school. I think that in classes like honors chemistry, and for some reason I took AP Chem my senior year, I should not have done that. It just felt like I was hitting a wall almost of my capabilities. Like I would do my best to like learn during the class sessions and then do the homework, do the practice sets, and go into tests like honestly pretty confident, and then not get grades that I wanted or was used to. That's not to say I was like killing it in my other classes. I mean, I was doing well. I am intentionally not using specific grades because I think those are quite subjective in terms of like what's good and what's bad for everyone. But I would say that in general, I just wasn't meeting the standards that I was used to meeting. And I would say in high school, that was like the first time I really noticed that in terms of feeling like my classes and my efforts in my classes weren't being fully reflected with the grade that I wanted. And as a student, as somebody who wants to succeed in classes, which I think is a very relatable feeling across the board, that can be really tough. Like that can be tough to feel like something that you have assigned a lot of your self-worth to up to that point is no longer like giving you that same satisfaction. And it didn't necessarily get better in college. I would say in some ways it did. So in college, I went to Georgetown, which is a school in Washington, D.C., and I was in this joint degree between our business school there and our foreign service school. And again, like I feel like I succeeded well enough in classes, but wasn't like knocking it out of the park with each class. I again felt like it wasn't for lack of trying, but this time it was a little different. because something that I had realized in high school that bled into college was that I really excelled in certain extracurriculars. Not all of them, but just certain ones, which is great. Like, it was a very new feeling for me because I think up until high school, I felt like I got my most satisfaction, my fulfillment from doing well in my classes. But specifically in high school, I did speech and debate, which again is a very common experience for people who went to my school, especially. And I just fell in love with it, honestly. I think that there are a lot of people, how do I put this, who really enjoyed speech and debate, and it just became its own, at times, insular community, which is ironic because speech and debate is like a national thing and you can compete across the nation pretty much throughout the school year, which I was lucky enough to do for several years. But I remember that feeling of validation, not just from the awards that were given out at the end of each tournament when you were competing, but also just the internal validation of relentlessly grinding at something. And I think at some point in my speech and debate time, I was like, oh, this is how I should feel for like certain classes that I don't think I'm maybe like putting in the extra mile for, or like really going at studying or whatever I think I should be doing. And that kind of propelled me into college as well, where there were certain extracurriculars I was willing to just put in. It just felt like as much time as was needed in order to make the best product possible. There was a consulting club I was a part of earlier on during college that I was putting that mentality to. And then later on, I started a club and helped start another club. And that was also something that I felt like I could really work on and get good at. It was almost the equivalent of like getting my hands dirty and actually like confronting problems that I saw. Like, that's why I started those clubs, was because there were, in my opinion, like certain deficiencies in knowledge and industry that those clubs could help fill. Versus, I think with classes, obviously it's very theoretical, it's very academic, and that definitely has its place, and I learned a lot. But with the clubs, even back in high school, I felt like the collaboration I got to do, the very cool people I got to meet, and see like the impact happen right there and then. Like, if I in high school like gave a speech, I would know by the end of that day like how that speech was received, and if that was something that I could be like proud of or something to like work on. And then in college, like with clubs, you have the ability to like pull off these really big events that is pretty rare, I would say, for like a college experience if done well, and like bring people together, make impact, make these like really solid deliverables, solid products. And I think at some point in high school, and more so in college, I got to that sense of satisfaction and like chasing after that. I'm trying to make this sound as if like I was able to do that concurrently with my classes, because it's not like I was ignoring them, but I definitely think by the time I got to college, I could recognize that like, yes, classes are important, but I just don't feel like I ever or have yet to develop that drive for like relentlessly pursuing a class the way I have for certain extracurriculars and other things that I've done. So what does that all mean? I would say that while I am so grateful for my education, and I think that I am a very good student, I can't say that like I really enjoyed a good amount of classes that I took, particularly I would say in college. But I think the ones that I enjoyed the most were the ones that succeeded in teaching me how to think and not what to think. I think that's a really important point in college, where you have somewhat of a control over what classes you could take, particularly as you get older. But you still can't learn everything you want in 4 years. And also, maybe you'll have a similar experience to me where, like, halfway through college, you kind of want to pivot and learn about other things because you're probably like 19 or 20 years old and you are on a path that you thought you wanted to do and then you just completely pivot. I think that is obviously completely fair. And then if that happens, I think like what becomes more important is that you are learning how to think and how to challenge yourself in that way. And that's definitely something I sought out. I would say there are a few like pivotal moments in college that led me to my current role as a podcast producer, which is that there's a certain course at Georgetown called the Carroll Forum, and it can be quite controversial for reasons that I will not get into here. But if you happen to know of it, then I'm sure you know why it can be controversial. I think for me, the Carroll Forum, which was the entirety of sophomore year, really taught me to critically think. And it was the first class of college for me where I felt like I was understanding at a deeper level, like why I was doing what I was doing, whether that was learning, interacting with people, even what college meant. And that led me to pick up this book called The Constitution of Knowledge by Jonathan Rauch. And that book delved into mis and disinformation, which has been a key interest of mine since sophomore year, so a few years ago. And in that book, Jonathan Rauch not only like develops a really compelling argument in my opinion, but also name drops these two organizations that ended up being my first two organizations of like, I would say, real employment, of where I was like really putting in the work to get those positions and then ultimately serve those organizations. And that second organization is where I work at now. So that's how I attribute like the main cornerstones of how college set me up for my current role. For now, like I don't think classes had as big of an effect. That obviously isn't like the full truth. Like there's definitely nuances of how classes helped me, but that's how I view my current very nascent career trajectory. And while that might continue to change, I do think one constant has been Notion. So I say this every time, but Notion is a productivity software. You can use it on your desktop, on your mobile, on your tablet, and it has really, really helped me as a tool to pretty much organize whatever needs to be organized. I used to say organize my life, but life is very messy and chaotic, and I don't think it can ever be fully organized. But I do think a Notion template that isn't quite out there yet that I wanted to introduce in this podcast episode is how to find jobs while you're in school. I think that's a very separate distinction from like a school Notion template or like a job seeking template, because I think something that made me stressed as a student was finding a job like post school. And that's why I'm really excited to be presenting my latest Notion template, which is a job tracker as a student. This Notion template is literally called Job Seeking as a Student, and it's a really simple template that just combines those two aspects of job seeking and being a student. So there are four main components of this template. The first one being an overall calendar view that links to Notion Calendar, which is Notion's version of a calendar. Would recommend you checking it out. It integrates really well with your existing calendar, whether that's Google, iCal, or something else. And then the second component is a list view of all the school tasks that you might have going on in a given day, week, or month. So whether that is completing math homework or finishing a final essay, there's a section there for you to list everything out as you need. The third section is then going to be the job process in a board view. So breaking it down currently by due date. When is something due? Is it a networking call? Is it an application? Is it an interview? That is where all of the job related aspects will live. And then the final component is just going to be the original database that has all of your information already, whether that's school, work, with AI and charts components as well, which is a bit harder to describe in podcast form, but is really helpful in some of Notion's newer features that I think makes this template a bit more updated than some of the other templates out there. At the end of each template, I'm now including Notion's latest feature, which is its forms feature, just to solicit feedback. I want to keep making better Notion templates as time goes on. And if you are interested in checking out the Notion template that I created, it will be in the description. You can also find me just on the Notion template website with my handle, Sam H. Lee. Would love for you to check it out. You don't necessarily need to be a student right now to find it helpful, but I definitely would particularly encourage students to check it out and then fill out the feedback form. I want to keep getting better at making Notion templates, and I think this is a great way to do just that. Let me know what your thoughts are in general about being a student. Feel free to comment in whatever platform you're listening to right now. Substack is the main one that I check, but also we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all of that. I want to keep making podcast episodes about how I use Notion, how I use it for budgeting, for other life stuff, and I will definitely be using more of both my YouTube and Instagram polls to figure out what people might be interested in. So check me out there. That's at Sam H. Lee. And until next time, we'll see you then.